2016-ordinance 3 is an ordinance of the Clay County Commission. That is a commission ordinance, and that is approval of the ordinance modification pertaining to the Clay County Commission agenda.
Once again, I do have opposition to this particular ordinance. As I said last week, this puts the citizens of this county, who are in fact our bosses, at the end of the line as far as comments go. If citizens take time off work to be here and to actually participate in their government, I don't think it's right that they have to wait through almost an entire meeting before they are allowed to redress their government grievances or to express an opinion. Much has been made that we've referred to our constituents as customers, and as I said last week, a private business would not treat its customers with such disrespect. I believe this measure is part of a broader agenda to repress dissent and any comments from the public. Citizens who approach this commission have been ridiculed, subject to name calling of the worst kind, and required to sign releases to express their opinions to the government that is supposed to serve them, and this is wrong. One of the reasons last week given to eliminate commissioner comments, which is part of this, was that it has been used to raise subjects that are not positive in nature. And last week, Commissioner Ridgeway used the comments to take the county collector to task, even to the point of raising her voice and accusing the collector and her staff of wanting to injure taxpayers. It is ironic indeed that the commissioner would use this method that she condemned earlier in that meeting. Commissioner Ridgeway also said last week that the commission did not need comments because we were able to discuss business at other noticed meetings. I would contend that many of these meetings are closed to the public because they are meetings of members of organizations or they charge admission. One example was a closed meeting of the EDC Executive Board. Commissioner Ridgeway wanted to discuss issues that may come before the commission for a vote, and I refused. Unless we cite a statutory exception, we are not to discuss the people's business in closed executive sessions of the commission, much less a closed session of another organization. And finally, we're eliminating administrator comments. Even though we may disagree, I think that it is a positive thing for the administrator to have the option to make comments on non-agenda items to the commission, that he's able to address the commission in a free and open manner. I would like to see that also continue, but that will also be eliminated. With that, as I said, I will be opposing this particular measure, and I will open the floor to further discussion. Commissioner Ridgeway?
I do, but
Please.
I would like an opportunity to know, is this just me commenting on it, or is it your intent that this is the time for me to be recognized to close on this item?
I'll tell you what, let me see if I don't have anything further. If Commissioner, do you have anything? In that case, you could both take the opportunity to comment and close. I don't anticipate any further discussion. We kind of discussed it a lot, and I feel that the opinions have been aired on both sides. So please proceed.
Well, first, I move the adoption of 2016 Ordinance 30.
So move. Discussion.
With that, we may disagree as to where on the agenda public comment or comment from office holders or comments from the administration may go on the agenda. But what you can't argue with is what my purpose is. My purpose and my design is to give time for us to promptly go to agenda items that have been made and published according to the Sunshine Law. The way the meetings have been conducted, many times our published agenda has been put on the back burner, sometimes for over an hour. I don't think that's fair to the people who came here expecting for their business to be conducted promptly, without delay. That's the way it's happened. So it only seems reasonable to me that those agenda items should come first in respect for the Sunshine Law, where we published it, in respect for the people who had done the advance work and got their items on the agenda. That means no disrespect whatsoever to the public comment, to the office holders, and to agency comments. As it turns out, many times, the office holders continue to remain in the building, are easily accessible. Secondly, our agency comments, once again, they're employees, they stay here, they're employees, they work here, the office holders, they work here, they're in the building. With regard to the public comment, I think it was raised last week that if an office holder is raised during public comment, that office holder's subject matter is raised, that they would like an opportunity to respond to it. That's fair. That is very fair. And that is the result. We keep all three of them together. Also, we give a different and a better time for public comment without the time pressure to move forward with published agenda items for the Sunshine Law. It actually may result in giving the public, office holders, and agency more time to discuss their matters with their elected officials or with the county commission rather than less. With regard to deleting the county administrator comments, we found, and I've had discussions with the county administrator, he has no problem with deleting the county administrator comments. As a general rule, he wants to get his information to us in a more expedient manner than waiting for a formal meeting. Hence, email, private discussions, telephone calls, text messages, they're all more rapid and more accurate and allows for more of an interchange than waiting for commissioner or county administrator comments. And the one thing that I will have to comment on with regard to commissioner comments, yes, it is true that the history and the tradition of this commission has been the commissioner comments were reserved for things that were uplifting and things where you could answer the question, does this comment make Clay County better? Yes, no. As a general rule, it was always reserved for uplifting comments, comments to frankly have brag points about our district or our area. But lately, public comment has been used to read pages and pages of what appears to be campaign speeches or thrashing employees, challenging contract employees, embarrassing employees, calling out other office holders by name. That does not make Clay County better. And as a result, I think, and I will be very happy to write an item that will go along with the minutes of this meeting as to the history of why commissioner comments had to be deleted, frankly, for the good of the county. And commissioner comments has even been used to raise matters of pending litigation, all at the peril of taxpayers of the county. Those issues should not be discussed while we have pending litigation going on. Employment matters should not be discussed in commissioner comments. We just had a lengthy discussion about that today. Because of the abuses that have occurred and because the commissioner comments are no longer consistently being used for the betterment of the county, it appears that the only possible remedy is to delete commissioner comments. No one is being stopped from commenting on whatever item they want to comment on. We are just deleting it as part of the published agenda of this commission because I can no longer give my stamp of approval to some of the damaging things that have been raised during commissioner comments, all against the history and tradition of this commission. And as a result, I renew my motion.
The motion has been renewed. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Ridgeway.
Yes.
Commissioner Owen.
Yes.
Commissioner Nolte.
No. That brings us to 2016.
That is an ordinance of the Clay County Commission, and that is approval of ordinance modification. The request has come from the commission.
Thank you very much. The concern has been expressed to me that citizens have been allowed too much time to speak in some cases. I believe the greatest latitude possible should be allowed to citizens to express their opinions or to question our commission. Occasionally, those questions are going to make those of us who are elected officials uncomfortable. So be it. Once again, the people are the boss. They deserve our respect. I realize that some bodies, like school boards, do time debate, and I think we have that ability to do that, and we have in the past. School boards meet generally once a month. We meet once in a week. Ordinance 31 allows the majority of commissioners, in my opinion, to essentially tell the public to sit down and shut up. It is wrong. Do not support the ordinance in this form. We have in the past limited debate on an issue with equal time for each side. This ordinance may well change that practice of equal time in favor of the expression of an opinion that commissioners wish to hear. It's unclear to me. Once again, 31 seems designed to reduce free debate. Further discussion? You are, I'm sorry, yes, that's why I said further discussion. Oh, if you're going to close it, check Commissioner. You don't have any comments, okay. Very well, you're ready now. Oh, I'm sorry, wait a minute, I jumped too fast. You wanted to comment, Mr. Lawson?
Is it okay now?
It is, I apologize, I got kind of going there.
I apologize for some of it because it's difficult to hear you all, for me.
I'm sorry.
So, Jerry, you're fine. you speak loud enough. Again, before I make a comment about this, let me make one other real quick comment. I see the press is here today, but normally, it's my understanding, the press doesn't attend a lot of the commission meetings. Having said that, one of the problems I think I have and a lot of the public is that we get our information via Facebook, and that can be slanted depending on who in the heck is putting that information out. So for a person to follow what's going on at the commission meeting is you attend the commission meetings, which would be nice if we could all do that, but obviously common sense tells us we can't. You can read Facebook. That's, and again, you're going to get maybe slanted one way or the other. So keeping informed is very difficult for the public. Which brings me to I think the ordinance that's in front of me, where you're going to start limiting time for the public to make comments. Now, I can appreciate there are time restraints, but number one, I think those time restraints ought to be applied equally. If you're going to give Jay Lawson up here 5 minutes to speak, then I think the same thing should apply to Clay County EDC, the health board, whoever that comes up here. If you've got a vendor, I think they should get 5 minutes. I don't think you can pick and choose what person gets what amount of time. I think it ought to be equal across the board. To take that a step further, and again, I can understand time restraints, but I think those restraints ought to allow enough time for that person to make a point. I put it on Facebook, and Gene can appreciate this, or I'm sorry, Commissioner Owens can appreciate this probably more than anybody. Gene and I were commissioners when we had a landfill issue in Clay County. And Gene will remember that those landfill hearings went on for months. Right, Gene? Right, Commissioner? They went on for months, and they went on 5 days a week, right through the Christmas season. We didn't stop, but we didn't deny the public an opportunity to come up and make their point. Now, when you start adding restrictions for public, or time restraints for public or office holders, I think you're getting into some dangerous areas. And I also would go one step further, in my personal opinion. I think you're starting to violate First Amendment constitutional rights. Yes.
I'd like to bring that up because a lot of people don't. Can you hear me now? Yeah. I was just remembering that landfill meeting out there, and if you can remember, we had a lot of people opposed to that deal, and it was never going to go through in the first place that we knew about it. But if you can remember, we had hundreds of people on one side, and so we did limit. Because the people were coming up and saying the same thing over and over again, so we did limit. The opposition was called to opposition to, like, I don't know, it was 5 minutes or whatever, but we would have still been there out there if we let everybody talk for an hour on each issue. So on some issues like that, I think that some of those issues needs to be shortened a little bit. I don't think we know what they're all saying. They're all opposed to it, And so, I think on that particular case, you remember, we did limit the opposition on some time constraints.
Right, Commissioner, I do remember that, and I'm not saying that there shouldn't be time limits. I'm not opposed to that. I'm just saying that they ought to be equally applied to anyone and everybody.
And I'll just say that, on each situation is a little bit different. I mean, if we had another land issue up there for a deal, I would say the same thing will happen. And, which I don't think anybody's interested in doing a landfill in Clay County.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, I think each situation is a little bit different. Here, last year, we had an issue on some wild animals. I don't remember. Yeah, it was a similar type of issue, and Commissioner Nolte, I think, at that time, he said, if somebody's gonna say the same thing, if you got something new to say, that's a different thing. But if you're gonna say the same thing over and over again, I mean, we've heard it, we know what the people want, so.
Right.
I think that, each issue is a little bit different, but, this just gives us a little bit of flexibility.
Well, and this may, but I just want to at least suggest that you keep that in mind, that there are going to be different situations, and to put something in an ordinance that's, if you will, law, that says you can restrict. And another thing, the way I read this, and maybe this isn't part of it, maybe it's part of that Facebook slant, but it also, I read something that two commissioners can, because I want to keep calling you jury. The presiding commissioner is in charge of the meeting. I think that's why you're the presiding commissioner. That's why people in this county elected a jury, or elected a presiding commissioner. If there's someone up here at the podium that's out of control, if you will, or out of line, I think that's the presiding commissioner's job and duty and requirement to put that down. Gene and I had to deal with the commissioner. You remember, there was, if you will, totally out of line. And Gene and I didn't need a resolution to handle it. We handle it like men. We handle it like professionals. That's all I'm saying. I would be very cautious about signing a resolution or having a resolution that starts restricting the public's ability to approach this commission to ask questions. There are things that I read on Facebook, I don't know if they're true or not, but the only way I can find out is come before this body and ask questions. If you want to restrict me from that, then I've lost my First Amendment rights. There are things been on Facebook about saddles, horse barns, you name it, things like that. I don't know if there's any truth to that. What I do know is I should have the ability, whoever I am, to come up here and address the commission, not be shut down. So having said all that, thank you.
And by the way, thank you for understanding earlier in your comments when I was trying to make sure that we were staying within a level of decorum. So like I said, I realize that you're uniquely qualified to understand the position that we are in up here, and I do appreciate your patience as we try to make sure that conversation stays in the appropriate vein.
No, I understand, I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and address my issue.
And thank you for bringing that up, because I think you're right, the zoning issue, which was, as you accurately remember, was somewhat thorny. What the restriction that was put on was, I believe, timed for each side, so there was a certain amount of time for each point of view, so it wasn't a limitation on an individual, but on the pro or the con side. And
What I appreciate the most is that we had a lot of people on the con side, it seemed like to me, and that, you asked, I said, well, if you have something new to say, because, it would, like I said, some of these would take hours to take a thing, and they're saying the same thing, so, but I appreciate you handling that at that time.
thank you very much. I'm sorry, Commissioner Ridgeway, we kind of diverted. You were going to be recognized to close. I apologize for the delay in that. Would you please go to the close? Or comment and close, whichever you prefer.
Well, first, I make a motion that we adopt 2016 Ordinance 31, and having said that, I will make some closing statements. Yes, we can disagree about what the policy should be, but I don't think you can challenge my motives any more than I can challenge your motives, because actually, I think at the core of it, we share a common motive. We want open access to the public and fairness to the public. The question is, what roadway do we take to get there? Now, if we have few people to speak, we can obviously allow more time. We have done that. That was a perfect example on a planning and zoning issue. We did allow more time for the public to speak on a very important issue. We did that through commission consensus. If we have many people who want to speak, then to assure that everyone is given a fair opportunity to speak without waiting an undue period of time, we can reasonably place time limits on the opportunity for everyone to speak so that we can have some reasonable degree of fairness so that the last person to speak isn't lost in the shuffle from the first 2 or 3 people to speak. We can add to that. Now, the other thing I would also say, again, from former Commissioner Lawson, I respect his service, but there is nothing in any change here that would restrict the content. There is nothing to restrict content, only some reasonable time limits. Reasonable time limits that I would argue are already in our current ordinances. It references in existing section 30.27 comments from the public. It says that each person addressing the commission shall approach the podium, give his or her name and address in an audible tone of voice for the record, and shall limit his or her address to an announced time limit. That is current law. That is current law. Secondly, it says no person other than the commissioners and the person having the floor shall be permitted to enter into any discussion. Shall be permitted to enter into any discussion. Now, if we want to change something, I would argue we have to change current law, because what former Commissioner Lawson is saying is current law and was law when he was a commissioner. Shall be permitted to enter into any discussion. That exists, either directly or through a member of the commission without the permission of the presiding commissioner, providing that a majority vote of the commission may overrule the presiding commissioner. Again, everything I just read to you is current law. It already exists. The only thing that I am clarifying, I'm sorry, Commissioner, but I think I've been recognized.
Yes, I'm sorry. We need to go ahead and respect Commissioner Ridgeway's ability to finish and not do. Well, I'm sorry, but since we've gone into closing, I think we're going to have to let that slide now. So I think we're going to let Commissioner Owen finish.
Okay, well, am I granted some rebuttal at some point? Again, if I'm not, that's part of the problem with the resolution. I mean, I ought to be able to make a comment if she's gonna, if the Eastern Commissioner is gonna say something that I have an issue with. I believe that's my First Amendment rights.
Yeah, I'm just trying to keep the meeting moving in an orderly fashion. If Commissioner Ridgeway will yield, then yes, I will allow it. But otherwise, she's going to close. Commissioner Ridgeway, will you yield to Mr. Lawson?
If you have something to say, but Commissioner, and I will refer to you as Commissioner because I respect the title. It seems to me that you are complaining about things that are current law, not about the little bit of a change having to do with reasonable time limits that's already here.
And Commissioner, that's my point. That's already in place. What are you trying to do with this resolution? What are you changing?
If you're prepared for me to respond.
I am.
The majority, it was not clear in current law as to how the time limits were arrived at. Does the person speaking announce the time limits? Does the presiding commissioner determine the time limits? Does a majority of the commission determine the time limits? It says that no person can enter into any discussion. There's your content discussion. There's the abridgment of your First Amendment rights, if any exist, in current law. Okay? But it says without the permission of the presiding commissioner, providing that a majority of the commission can overrule the presiding commissioner and give you the opportunity to discuss the content that you desire to discuss. There's your First Amendment protection. All I am doing is adding in here that a majority of the commission is the body that makes the determination about the time limit, so we don't have an arbitrary discussion as to who is it that limits the time. It should be a majority of your elected officials that determine the announced time limit, and not just anybody who comes to the podium, not just by the edict of one person, but rather by a majority of this commission. That's all I'm clarifying. Maybe there was a misunderstanding about what I was doing.
Well, again, let me go back to what I'm referring to what I get on Facebook. Again, the problem being is that we don't, the public like myself have to depend on Facebook to know what's being said. That's why I'm up here asking the question and asking for explanations. I'm not trying to be disruptive. I just want to know why you have to change something if it's already in place. You've answered my question. Again, the issue I go back to is, isn't that the presiding commissioner's job? Isn't that what he was elected to do, to preside over the meeting, to, if somebody's out of line, to put that person in their place? Am I wrong someplace along that?
I explained it the best that I could. I apologize.
Please speak more to the microphone so we don't.
I said I have explained it the best that I know how. Is
Well,
that
my fear, Commissioner, and I hope I'm wrong, is that if one of the commissioners up here brings up an issue that they think is important to Clay County citizens, and the other two commissioners have a problem with that they can shut that issue down.
that's existing. That's in Robert's Rules of Order.
Exactly.
It exists.
Exactly, but there's a way to do it. You don't need an ordinance to do it.
If I can close.
You know, fine, I won't interrupt you more. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ross.
To continue, I believe there's a basic misunderstanding of what is current law and what we're clarifying. Again, current law says that each person addressing the commission shall approach the podium and shall limit his or her address to an announced time limit. That is current law. It doesn't say who regulates the time limit. It does later on, when it talks about the topic of discussion, that's to be done with the presiding commissioner, providing the majority vote of the commission may overrule the presiding commissioner. But it doesn't say, and all I'm trying to clarify here is who announces the time limit. Is it the person standing at the podium? Is it the presiding commissioner all alone? Or is it the majority of the commission? This clarifies something that's missing in our current ordinance. It clarifies the majority of the commission gets to determine that. I think that's reasonable. It's missing in current law. It makes a clarification to it. I think it adds a degree of fairness because one person is not allowed to determine how long they will speak. And one elected official is not allowed to determine, but rather a majority of the commission. That's all this does. And so as a result, I renew my motion.
Motion has been renewed. Madam Clerk, if you would please call the roll.
Commissioner Ridgeway.
Yes.
Commissioner Nolte.
Yes.
Commissioner Nolte.
No. That brings us to 2016 ordinance.
Clay County Commission, and that is approval of ordinance modification that was requested by the County Commission.
This is something else that there's been some disagreement on that I disagreed with. What we're talking about doing can be done by suspending the rules, which obviously requires the agreement of all three commissioners. As I said, we have 4 meetings a month. That doesn't sound like too many to have to come in for. I do understand that sometimes there are holidays and other considerations. However, if this were taken to its conclusion, we could in fact end up having 2 meetings a month, cutting those in half. And the concern I have is based on transparency and open government. If we take an issue up in a combined session, it leaves little or no time for proper notification of the public so that they can be able to express their opinions. It's been commented that sometimes when I bring things up, I try to move too quickly, that I bring them up and I try to move them too fast. This would in fact cut the time in half of anything I'd even considered as far as moving too fast. So this would double my quickest speed in trying to bring something up. And like I say, it's most of the stuff that we deal with is pretty much consensus. I mean, when you look at the first 3 items we dealt with on our regular agenda, once the concerns were alleviated, we were able to agree to go forward on these issues that are forwarded to the Sheriff's Department. And that takes in an awful lot of what we do. I would like to put forward an amendment to that, to this ordinance. Basically what this does is it virtually puts everything under immediate action, which in normal times requires a unanimous vote. My amendment would allow us to only take up matters that the Commission has reached a consensus on. That includes a majority of the issues, as I've said, that ends up coming before us, and it would allow for a full and free public debate on controversial items. So at the end of, and I'm sorry, these don't have the numbers, so I'm just going to go ahead and read the amendment that I'm proposing, and I will read it twice just to make sure that that if anyone who's writing it down would be able to do that. So this would come under C. The last sentence in the existing 32A, the last phrase is session upon majority vote of the Commission, period. Past that, I would add no vote or official action of the Commission will be taken at any combined session except matters that require immediate action of the Commission by unanimous consent of all 3 commissioners, whereupon the matter may be acted upon by the Commission. I'll go ahead and read that one more time because it's new material and I want it to be understood as clear. I do not have, I've got a copy of it here. We could go ahead, in fact, tell you what. Let me go ahead and just do that right quick. I'm going to read it one more time, and then perhaps what we need to do is stand at ease for a couple of minutes while we distribute.
We need to hold on to this one second. There's also a technical correction that needs to be made in 2016 Ordinance 32A to be adopted by the Commission, and that the suggestions for change in 3016A and B were properly incorporated into the ordinance proposed for signature, but C is still in bold, and that would just be put the bold.
Well, I tell you what, let's, given that staff is making a copy of what I'm proposing, why don't I withdraw my amendment for the moment? If you want, is what you're proposing a requirement?
No, it just requires a technical correction and whatever's to be signed by the Commission. We have a working copy in our book, and we
I
also
see
have.
what you mean. I thought there was some other problem with the wording.
No.
Okay.
Well, there's no problem with the wording, it's just a technical correction. This portion here would just be in regular.
Regular type rather than bold, as would the first sentence under B. Would it also be?
Well, you're looking at the one.
Okay, it's your copy. Okay, I'm looking at the copy. Yeah. Okay, so here's the already regular form.
You should have two.
That's probably why it gets a little bit confusing.
There's, I don't know if you recall or not, but we asked staff that they put our working copy in there that has the rules and the brackets, and then we asked them to put one that would be prepared for.
Yes, that is true. I just didn't realize that it had not been on the others. Okay, so what you're saying is we need to make sure that C is on the copy we sign in regular font as the whole.
Yeah.
I don't, as Commissioner Ridgeway indicates, I don't believe that requires an amendment, just instruction to staff. staff. Mr. Administrator, are you, does that make sense to you, what we just said?
Yes.
Very good. With that, I will renew my motion, not renew, but I will remake, since I would do it, I will remake my motion to amend 2116 Ordinance 32A. There's been a copy distributed. I'll go ahead and read it one more time just for clarity's sake, because it's going to be new to the public and those listening. After the last line of C under 30.16, the sentence ending "session upon majority vote of the commission," period, the following text would be added: no vote or official action of the commission will be taken at any combined session except matters which require immediate action of the commission by unanimous consent of all three commissioners, whereupon the matter may be may be acted upon by the commission. Sorry for the errors there, folks. With that, that is the motion that I would like to make. I think what that amendment would do for me would be to alleviate my concerns that we would be entering into controversial issues with insufficient time to discuss, research, and get input from the public. That would quite honestly solve a lot of the concerns I have as far as how we proceed. I realize that there are going to be issues that come up that need to be handled, but I think this would at least allow us to be able to handle some of those issues that are not controversial in nature and able to keep the function of the government going. So with that, I'll open the floor for discussion.
Yeah, I've got a question for you.
Sure.
Right now, if we have the consent of all three commissioners, we can put it on a regular agenda, we can put it on immediate action, we can put it on discussion item. So, as I read your amendment, you're actually making the rules more restrictive than they currently are.
Yes, I'm making them more restrictive on ourselves
Than they currently are.
than they currently are. Oh, well, then they are proposed to be, because right now
No.
we don't have combined. So, I mean, it would, under this, it would make 32A more restrictive on us, as in 32A more restrictive on us, yes.
Well, basically, your amendment totally guts my amendment, because you say no vote or official action of the commission will be taken at any combined session, except matters which require immediate action of the commission. Well, right now, if we all vote to have a combined session, we can put it on discussion item, we can put it on regular, we can put it on immediate action. We've got options. You're limiting it to only those things that fall within the category of immediate action. So you're not only taking it back to current law, you're making it more restrictive than current law if this amendment is adopted.
The reason behind that was that this would allow, in a combined session, everything is virtually on immediate action anyway. It would be on immediate action without the restriction of immediate action items have as far as the unanimous vote. So what this allows is for us to treat issues as if they were immediate action, and yet without the current restrictions of an immediate action issue.
But you say which require immediate action, so that would refer back to our current rules about immediate action. And so we're limited because you're still requiring unanimous consent of all three commissioners. That's current law. But if we have unanimous consent of all three commissioners under current law, we could put it on regular, we could put it on discussion item, or we could follow the rules that fit in immediate action. This is far more restrictive than what our current rules are.
What this would do is, it would still allow under this for a combined session to be called with a majority of the commission. It does not eliminate that. What it does limit is the issues that we can be taking up. I don't believe we should be taking up issues that require more discussion and more research. For instance, there was one instance where a contract was brought before us on immediate action. It was withdrawn, but I think that if we're going to enter into a contract, we should be looking at it more carefully than just a few days and no time to really request more information
Totally agree, total agreement with you on that, which is why we didn't take it up on immediate action. I'm just saying, your amendment not only guts what I'm doing in the amendment, but in addition to that, you're making it more restrictive, because you basically make everything that would be in a combined session go on to the requirements for immediate action.
But we're already there. They would already be on immediate action virtually. But what this does do is it still allows something that you were wanting, and that was to have the combined work and business sessions. So it does not interrupt that process of having that happen by a majority vote.
So really, you don't need anything in your amendment after the phrase immediate action of the commission. Did you write the amendment, or did council write the amendment, or the county administrator write the amendment? Who wrote it?
I don't know. I am open to suggestions, and I appreciate your thoughts here.
I don't think you need anything to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish after the phrase require immediate action of the commission, period. Everything else can be deleted.
Mr. Counselor, what are your thoughts?
I think if I'm tracking, what you essentially want to do is that combined sessions, you want only those matters that are unanimously passed to be considered passed. Is that fair?
That's pretty correct, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute, I'm confused then. Your understanding is, what he's trying to do is if we have a combined work and business session, then only the things that we vote on unanimously.
Passed. That's why I was reading this. Is that?
The thought process behind that intent is that everything is at that point virtually immediate action. I'm just trying to make sure that they are then treated as immediate action, because they are, for all intents and purposes, immediate action items. So I'm just saying we need to treat them as immediate action items. That way we can go forward on those items that we have consent on. An example would be the first 3 regular agenda items that we had this morning. That's an example of what would go through on a combined session. So I didn't know we had to
Really, what you're trying to say is no vote or official action of the commission will be taken in any combined session except matters passed by the consent of all 3 commissioners.
Does what Commissioner Ridgeway just read,
I think that works.
that works for what at least my intent
The
was?
intent
Whether
is
it's,
what I think.
it gains a majority vote, obviously a different matter, but I believe you understand where I'm trying to go with this, and that in your mind would get us to where I'm trying to go.
So the amendment would read, no vote or official action of the commission will be taken at any combined session except matters passed by unanimous consent of all 3 commissioners, period.
Do you want to say all 3, but if you only have 2 present? I would just say unanimous consent of members present.
A unanimous consent with that,
Yeah.
and then just drop off of all 3 commissioners.
Yes.
That's a good point, because there are occasions
Certain
when
times where you won't have 3,
that is
especially around holidays when these are often happening.
very good. So that would, if I may go ahead and read what I believe would come up with to this point, is no vote or official action of the commission will be taken at any combined session, except matters passed by unanimous consent. Sorry.
It doesn't have to say a member's present,
You got a point, I think at that point your form dictates.
unanimous consent.
Yeah.
Okay, so the quorum will close at that point, so then there'll be a period after consent. I'm gonna vote for the amendment to your amendment, because I think it really clarifies what you were trying to say, because I think the way it's originally written, it doesn't do that. I'm probably not gonna vote for it to go on there, because it still guts the intent of my ordinances.
Okay, so where we are right now is we have an amendment to the amendment proposed by Commissioner Ridgeway. Is that where we are?
Is it easier for you to withdraw and then
Let me just withdraw, it might be clear just to withdraw and just to make that meeting.
Yes. I think that's clear story there.
I will withdraw the amendment made, and I will propose the amendment that in the place of the ordinance that we had previously referenced, we insert the language, no voter or official action of the commission will be taken in any combined session except matters passed by unanimous consent.
Okay, so that's his, he
That's
said
his
voter,
amendment.
but he meant vote.
He said vote yes.
I'm sorry, I
Yes.
misspeak.
That's what I heard too.
No vote or official, apologize for
Yes.
misspeak.
Okay, so there's no amendment to the amendment, there's just an amendment.
Just
There's a new
amendment.
amendment.
Okay, then I'm gonna speak against the amendment.
Okay, I propose the amendment, and so now we will open for discussion. Commissioner Ridgeway, please proceed.
I'm gonna speak against the amendment because if we're going to have majority vote to combine sessions, then you're saying not guts that. So I stick with my original modification to our ordinances that would allow majority vote to prevail as opposed to unanimous.
Call the roll on amendment.
I was actually going to see if you had comment before I did so.
John, ready.
Okay, I will just, I will close right quickly here, I'll just take a moment or two. In my opinion, this still allows those meetings to occur. I understand that particularly around the holidays and at times when there is a situation that requires it, it is reasonable to have a combined session. I believe this amendment would alleviate my concern that issues could be, in fact, railroaded through one of the commissioners on an immediate action type of situation, so to speak, and that it would in fact decrease the public's ability to comment on those items that are controversial. With that, if there are no further discussion, Madam Clerk, call the roll on, and we are voting presently on the amendment to 32A. Please proceed.
Commissioner Nolte?
Yes.
Commissioner Ridgeway?
No,
Commissioner Owen?
No.
The amendment fails. That brings us back to 2016 Ordinance 32A. Are there any other, is there any further discussion? Seeing none?
we're not supposed to.
Yes, please.
All this does is change from unanimous to majority with regard to combining work and business sessions. This commission has traditionally combined work and business sessions, particularly around holidays. I don't believe that there's much opportunity for abuse having to do with this, but if there is, all it requires is a majority vote for the commission to undo it. So, this clarifies our rules having to do with a majority vote for a combined work and business session. With that, I renew the motion.
Motion has been renewed. Madam Clerk, if you would please call the roll.
Commissioner Ridgeway?
Yes.
Commissioner Owen?
Yes.
Commissioner Nolte?
No. That brings us to our consent agenda.